Hi everyone, I'm Rob Walpole, CEO of Custom Goods, a nationwide logistics service provider that as part of our business is focused on the port ecosystem. Today I have the pleasure of spending some time with Mike Jacob from the PMSA, and Mike can describe better than I the role of his organization in the industry, and look forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, thanks for having me here and having the conversation today, Rob. Pacific Merchant Shipping Association represents marine terminal operators, ocean carriers on the U.S. West Coast, and we provide administrative, law, lobbying, public policy advocacy services for the industry.
Tariffs. Let's talk about tariffs. And so obviously it's an interesting time in the world, and one of the views that was shared over the conference over the last few days was, the perspective that once tariffs are, if they're put in a sustainable way, even if they're unbuckled in the next sort of year or two, it takes a long time for the world to get back to a level playing field in terms of the tariff environment. And we all have our opinions of what everyone has opinions about what might or might not happen as far as tariffs are concerned, both in the near term Mexico, Canada environment, and then China and other broader international tariff guidelines that are going into place. We see it in our business, of course, in a relatively immediate sense in terms of impact on, you see volumes and you see patterns changing pretty quickly as a result of tariffs. Again, for your stakeholders, what's the perspective? They'd be concerned, I'm sure, like all other parts of the economy are, but what are some of the key things that you're hearing from them?
The uncertainty associated with this is a real killer, right? I mean, the short-term initiative you might have to make an investment is really chilled. And again, where you're in this structural place where you're reacting to a lot of short-term change, but it's in a context of you're trying to exact some generational change. It's hard to reconcile those two things. So I'll take a step back a little bit and be a little bit more esoteric. The issue, I think, for us is when you look at some of the goals of the current administration with respect to trying to make sure that they're changing the trade deficit, right? Or they want to change where ships are produced, or they want to build additional infrastructure here for growth in the future. There's nothing inherently wrong about any of that. But it requires a completely different frame of doing business. And we've built all of our infrastructure around one frame of business, and that is being challenged, right? So if you look at this port complex, right? If you had to build the Port of LA and Long Beach around the United States being a major exporter, where are markets? Would you choose here? Probably not.
Nope, no chance.
Right. And so we have a lot of long-term issues with respect to those types of questions. Where have we invested our money? Where's the highest return as a country?
Yep.
Right. And what's the policy for changing that? And again, you can change it. Our members are in the business of moving cargo. So theoretically, if you told us, 20 years from now, you're going to be moving just as much stuff as you would have otherwise, but it's all going to be export loads instead of import loads. Conceptually, we don't care, right? But in the short term, what's the cost of that transition? And if it comes because we're, in the middle of a trade war, we're destroying value, we're not optimizing our supply chains, we're losing opportunities for additional investment, we're destroying potentially the opportunity to actually build up our trading partners' economy, right? I think that's one of the things that we're not talking about a lot, but you could have a repeat of the 1997 Asian financial meltdown if what you're doing right now is basically just extracting cash from developing economies, right? If you're trying to change the balance of trade, you're trying to change the way that we actually conduct business with our trading partners, and you're doing it in a way where we're saying what we want is a trade surplus while we also have a strong dollar, and we want to keep everyone employed, and we don't want any of the negative repercussions. Let's say there was some magical land you could pull all that off. It would be a zero-sum game for someone else. If we take all of that cash back, some other economy is basically paying us. And I think if you hear what the president's saying, and you take him at his word, which I think everyone should, he does want other countries to pay for the tariffs. He doesn't want the American consumer to pay. Well, there are ways to do that in the short term. They're very destructive, but higher tariffs and a stronger dollar, which is totally counterintuitive, right?
Economic math doesn't quite add up
Right,
there.
but you can, in the short term, you can do it. But what that does is it involves a really fundamental change in cash flows. And those are going to be damaging. Those are going to be really damaging. So I think what we're hearing from our members is what everyone else is hearing. You hear it real time. You're trying to react. And it's really important for everyone to keep a cool head because you don't really know what's happening from day to day, right? And then in the short term, could you even really change that much anyways, right? So I think one of the things, and maybe I'll turn this question back to you. In the short term, you already have contracts, right? You already have fulfillment. You already have boxes on the water. You already have warehouse space. Could you actually turn on a dime and change a lot of those things midstream?
So the way we see that is, I think there is some short-term impacts. As a logistics service provider, we obviously provide fulfillment, distribution, e-commerce services to our customers. And in the short term, not so much driven by changes in supply chain patterns, but by changes in either consumer demand or short-term impacts. Yeah, we expect to see some volume impacts there. When the de minimis guideline was implemented for, I think it was 5 days, going back 3 to 4 weeks, we run some businesses that are associated with that process, and we saw some pretty sudden impacts in that part of our business. But my view, and it's a different time frame, but a little bit of a similar sort of rhythm to what you described, which is, short term we'll see volume impacts. Supply chains adjust. If you look at, say, importers that are importing lower value commodities from international markets, they're not going to be made in the US. They're
right.
not. So the change will be, instead, if I use this de minimis example, instead of companies importing product under the de minimis guideline, they'll start to inventory product here and import in larger batches and become adopt a more regular fulfillment model. So short-term impact, that model might actually create some opportunity for us in the medium term. So we try and look at the landscape from a business standpoint, a little bit less macro maybe than the model you described, and say, well, here are areas where we see short-term impact, and we do see some. And how do we forecast what's going to happen with supply chain patterns for different sectors of the industry, and then prepare ourselves for those. So some of those lower value commodities, and let's say fashion retailers and other sectors, we think their models will change over time if the current environment sticks, right, in terms of tariffs, et cetera, and de minimis, that those supply chain models will change. So for us, it's about then figuring out and working out with our customers what solutions and what models do they need given the broader regulatory environment. And in some areas of the business, as I said, there'll be opportunities for us because the structures will change. In other areas, it's the other side. So it's the other situation where there'll be sort of things we'll need to do differently in our business that we make sure we're supporting our customers' needs, but it may actually be less advantageous to our business, but it's still the right economic move to make with our customers. The example there would be, and I think this is the right move, if you look at some of the impact of the de minimis changes, assuming they come back, which we do assume that will come back in 3-4 months, whatever time frame it is. There was a model established where a lot of companies would import full container loads via ship into Long Beach, transfer them down to Mexico under bond, and then break out and distribute back into the US on a de minimis basis. That model will disappear. And maybe appropriately so, right? That model will disappear. So people will still have demand for those products. There will still be supply chains that need to be set up to support that. So that will be most likely inventoried product in the US and a different distribution model for those customers. So that's a shorter term view, as you said, but it means we need to be on top of those changes with our customers and understanding how they interpret the environment and what they look to do. And then for us, we're in a business where we are able to be relatively flexible. Mm-hmm. So we are able to turn on a dime. I'm not quite sure, but able to move fairly quickly to procure and set up assets and networks to support our customers. And that's part of the fun of this business, actually. So a lot of moving parts there. Yeah.
It also seems like in the context of where we are right now, that example is a great example of the fact that if that's what the government was managing towards, you'd use a scalpel to get at that issue. And right now they're swinging
it's a
sledgehammer at it. And they have no idea, maybe conceptually at some high level they have an idea of what it is they're doing, but there's no possible way, given the speed and rapidity at which all this is occurring, that you could have actually gone through and sat down, had a conversation with all these people about what are all the unintended consequences of it. And I think that's why people are immediately going to the issue of inflationary pressure. There's going to be inflationary pressure. There's no way that you raise prices and constrict demand and not have that, right?
Yeah, you mentioned that there's a long list of unintended consequences that happen that result from the steps being taken right now, and how we digest those and actions to be taken. It is real time, and it's challenging for if you come back to our original sort of port ecosystem discussion with your stakeholders and the business that we run, for all of those stakeholders, there's a lot of unintended consequences and also unknown things that we need to figure out in the next weeks and months.
Yeah.
So Mike, that was fun. Covered a lot of important topics around our shared industry and the interest that the industry has in moving forward, both economically and in an environmentally sustainable manner. Thanks for joining me. Super fun. Look forward to helping you and your constituents move forward in the areas we discussed today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks very much. It was fun.
Thank you.